And now it is my privilege to turn the service over for a while to a dear, dear friend that I absolutely love and adore. And I just love hearing you speak. You always inspire me, my dear friend. And several of us are friends with Artie. He's a good friend to Wedgewood, Artie Hartsell.
Thanks so much, y'all. It's so good to be back. Thanks for having me. Good morning. It says I have an unstable internet, so if it gets unstable, put that in the chat and I'll just turn my camera off. But I'm just so grateful to be back here. It feels like a different era when Melba and I talked last about me joining you again. I'm really glad that I chose the topic I did, belonging to one another, and that Mother Teresa quote is perfect because that truth has really solidified for me even stronger in the last few weeks. So I'm going to jump around a little today, but I think if we can hold on through the ride, it will come together. Um, Western North Carolina has always been really special to me, like it is for a lot of people. So even people who haven't lived in that region often have deep connections to it. I was fortunate to split my time in Brevard in 2008, and I lived in Haywood County from 2019 to 2023. In 2021, Tropical Storm Fred caused catastrophic flooding in part of Haywood County. I was finishing a work meeting and got a text from a friend that read, "Does anyone have a boat?" Because two of our friends had climbed to a top bunk in their home with their cats and they needed rescuing. It was 20 minutes after that I got the flash flooding warning alert on my phone. Thankfully, those friends were rescued and are thriving now. And everyone in the community jumped into recovery mode. We had friends operating a supply hub from a church. I helped clean, sort, and identify photographs that were found during cleanup. And from day one, when it started and we jumped into recovery, I developed a guide that people could use to give or get support. Due to its topography, all the mountains in the region, most of Western North Carolina is part of what's known as the Appalachian Temperate Rainforest. There's a scientific process where masses of air get lifted over mountains and um, create more rain. Transylvania County sees more rain each year than anywhere else in the on the eastern side of the United States. And on Friday, September 27th, the ground was already saturated from consistent rainfall during the week. So when Hurricane Helene dumped 40 trillion gallons of water, which was 31 inches of rain in some places on Western North Carolina, it had nowhere to go. The rivers and the tributaries overflowed quickly. There were rumors, and even news stations were sharing that the dams were giving out and they were at a stage of imminent failure. Thankfully, they held strong, but water rose over and around them. I woke up in my Durham apartment on Saturday, September 28th, to news of catastrophic damage that we could not have imagined. Communications were down, but my friends managed to check in, even if it meant walking miles to get a bar of service. The same friends that survived and worked recovery in Haywood in 2021 were back at it. I knew how I could help, so I started to put together a guide that had all the information I knew as it was coming in, and I intended to keep it updated. I worked all weekend, and when I started, I could not have known how widespread and horrific the devastation would turn out to be, or how this um, dispersed all of the aid would be coming in and being needed. Um, I had to go back to work on Monday, but this coordination had to continue amidst all the chaos and misinformation about what was happening in the region. At any given time, there were 30 to 70 people accessing the guide. I put out a call, and today we have 65 people from across the country working on guide content, trauma support, and partner coordination for long term recovery with a plan of staying in operation for 5 to 10 years. When I started the guide for Western North Carolina about how to give and get aid, I was asked a few times why I didn't provide separate documents for each. And the truth is this: it is often the people who need help who are giving help. Sometimes they don't even accept help when it's offered because they are ashamed. We have people drop by and bring food who live in areas that have been decimated, but maybe they see something that they need and they ask for permission to take. When we use a mutual aid model, we understand that people will offer what they can and take what they need without conditions, the giving and the receiving. When I was growing up, my grandmother was the executive director of the Baptist Sharing House in Cabarrus County. My grandfather was a volunteer who was there every day and managed other volunteers and the grocery pantry aspect. My grandmother managed the clothes and intake. I spent many days in the summers there sorting and folding clothes, playing with kids of parents who brought them in. And it wasn't until later that I learned that my own family had also needed help at the Baptist Sharing House for some time. We gave and we received, but shame that my parents kept our need a secret. As a consultant, I work with organizations and churches on LGBTQ plus inclusion and belonging. And I must admit that there have been times in my life where I didn't think I belonged or when I felt like I was out of place. Sometimes it was because of my LGBTQ identity, and sometimes it wasn't. A few years ago, I felt so desperate that I binge listened to all of Brene Brown's books because she was the most readily accessible author on the topic. Of course, she said things I already knew. We don't have to work to belong because we already do belong. Oftentimes when I speak to churches or other organizations about inclusion, it feels like I'm asking those communities to do a favor, to let LGBTQ people belong to them, let them be part of the larger body. Growing up in a moderate Baptist tradition, we made the decision to be baptized when we were able to make that decision for ourselves. Of course, it was a statement of faith, but it was also a public commitment to be part of a church family. And when a person is baptized, the church members also promise to be that person's church family. It's a mutual agreement. And when LGBTQ people join a community, the community shouldn't feel like they're doing a charity. Instead, the feeling I want people to walk away with from deciding to be open and inclusive is one where they feel like they're being given a gift because they have made a space where people feel safe and included. They get to also receive the gift of those people's presence, love, and talents. LGBTQ people and the people of those communities are not separate. They now belong to one another in mutual relationship. I think you all know that we're all connected. I don't think that's new information. Even sitting here today, like I hear that from everything y'all are saying. And you've probably heard Mary Oliver's Wild Geese, where she tells us we don't have to be good. We are part of the family of things. Nature is an example of how we are meant to be with one another. It acts together. Everything impacts another thing. Parts of nature give and receive from other parts of nature. In Western capitalism, we are often put in manufactured competition, with individual success being supreme achievement. We are taught and forced to live in the lie of scarcity because of inequitable distribution of resources. In fact, many of the poorest communities have had their resources extracted only for those communities to later be ignored, like Appalachia. Whether we want to be or not, we are in relationship with everything, with one another and with the earth. And when we become intentional about those relationships, we can see the outcomes we want to have. But those relationships will have outcomes even when we're not intentional about it. Science fiction author Octavia Butler, whom I love and I definitely recommend, wrote, "All that you touch, you change. All that you change changes you. The only lasting truth is change. God is change." And if you've never read Robin Wall Kimmerer's book, Braiding Sweetgrass, Indigenous Wisdom, Scientific Knowledge, and the Teachings of Plants, it's this book right here. I also highly recommend it. She talks about how all of nature is in constant relationship. She uses the lessons of nature to teach us about our human relationships, as well as from a perspective of deep love for all of creation. In her book, she writes, "When times are easy and there's plenty to go around, individual species can go it alone. But when conditions are harsh and life is tenuous, it takes a team sworn to reciprocity to keep life going forward. In a world of scarcity, interconnection and mutual aid become critical for survival. So say the lichens." In Western North Carolina, I have seen people show up in this moment of scarcity like I have never seen in my life. Neighbors without homes to return to, who only once believed in the lie of competition, that people are poor only because they lost the competition, brought what they had to share. People who are struggling outside of Western North Carolina still put on their boots, still loaded trucks, still brought their chainsaws. People who love Western North Carolina but never lived there remembered the gifts they had been given by the land and the people, and they returned it. It's in these moments that we remember we belong to one another, that we are gifted and more powerful by being in relationship. You may be familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. As a social worker, I learned it in every class in undergrad and graduate school. The top of the pyramid, after you meet all your basic needs, is self-actualization. Now, Maslow never actually drew his hierarchy in a pyramid, but that's the way we have seen it. But the top is self-actualization, achieving one's full potential. But what a lot of people don't know is that Maslow spent 6 weeks among the Blackfoot Nation in development of his hierarchy of needs. The Blackfoot believed you're created with actualization, with whatever credentials you need to be part of community, to be treated with respect and dignity. You have your individual gifts already. At the top, quote unquote, of the Blackfoot Nation's understanding of actualization is community actualization, the ability to put aside our egos and bring what we have to the center for mutual and reciprocal relationship. And the more we practice that, the more we do that between disasters, the more natural it will become, and the more resilient and powerful we will be, and the more loved we will feel. That's all I have for you today. Thanks so much.
Artie, could you say that line again from one of the books? Oh, I forgot it. It was a line you said in one of the books, the ladies' book that you showed.
Sure. When times are easy and there's plenty to go around, individual species can go it alone. But when conditions are harsh and life is tenuous, it takes a team sworn to reciprocity to keep life going forward. In a world of scarcity, interconnection and mutual aid become critical for survival. So say the lichens.
Artie, what was that book that you shared, you held up? I want to
Yeah,
get the name of that.
Yeah. About the nature.
What's the name of it?
Kind of mute. It's Braiding Sweetgrass, Indigenous Wisdom, Scientific Knowledge, and the Teachings of Plants. But Braiding Sweetgrass, if you look that up, you'll find it.
Raining Sweetgrass?
Braiding.
Braiding.
And Artie, did you have a quote from that book?
Yeah, I read it, but I realized I was on mute. When times are easy and there's plenty to go around, individual species can go it alone. But when conditions are harsh and life is tenuous, it takes a team sworn to reciprocity to keep life going forward. In a world of scarcity, interconnection and mutual aid become critical for survival. So say the lichens.
It's an incredible book. It might not be a bad pick for the book club.
That's what I was just thinking.
Mm.
For a little change of pace, it sounds, I'm intrigued by, I guess, maybe I've heard it before, but didn't remember when you spoke of the pyramid and self-actualization, but then you spoke about the Blackfoot Nation community actualization. I love that. Community actualization.
Mm-hmm.
That
yeah,
encompasses so much, and I think that's what gets left out today.
Mm-hmm. There's an image that goes around sometimes about with the two images of the pyramid, and some people will draw the Blackfoot Nations in a teepee, so it's also kind of a pyramid, but neither one of them drew it in that way. But you can see kind of what the steps are for each one, but it almost is like people are born with the individual actualization, and if they need the basic needs, they should be getting that from their community.
Mm-hmm.
If you see that, can you send that to me?
I will.
And information on that. I'll share it with anybody that wants it. I'm intrigued by that. I guess I kind of knew it, but I just never put it together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and how the book says how how we're connected with the earth. We knew that, but it's good to hear it some more.
Yeah.
And, a different perspective. And we knew that we're connected to the trees and the earth and the birds and everybody else is connecting. We're here as one.
Exactly.
But I'd like to hear more from that book or read that book.
Yeah, I'm thinking that too. Maybe we present it to our book club.
Thank you, Artie. I didn't know you were a social worker, so I appreciate you.
I just made a note of that book.
I did too. Other thoughts or to share or discuss or talk about?
I just want to say that I have that book too, and I've been working through it. It's really nice how it's broken into stories, or it's like short stories.
Oh, I like short stories.
Really nice book club book. I would be super into that. And then Artie, yeah, I just am really glad to meet you. I do a lot of work with queer communities here in Denver, which we have a large amount of our community members here. But I'm curious what other groups or organizations or work that you're connected to in the area. I just would love to get involved when I move out there.
Yeah, when I was in Charlotte, I was part of a lot of organizations. Several of them don't even exist anymore. And a lot of them now have really centered around the business community because the chamber has gotten so large. But there are definite like pockets of communities. Maybe we can talk offline about like what you're interested in, and I can see if we can connect you to folks.
Well, that would, Artie's the perfect person for you to connect to.
There are definitely I think one thing that has happened in Charlotte is definitely a divide between like queer specific organizing, where that is like the thing that we focus on, and more of a queer people doing the work of racial justice and focusing on the criminal legal system, things like that. Which I think is really cool. in
Yeah,
Charlotte.
there are those groups, but they're definitely it's not what it once was. There's a lot of like mutual aid happening in Charlotte.
Pride is also a really great place to get involved. They've grown so much, and Liz is a great contact for them. They have, I mean, they've grown so much, and they have like a lot more
Connections.
I was gonna say like diversity, I guess is the word, but like a lot more different types of people than there used to be in the Pride world.
Yeah, it's changed a lot, but yeah, I'd be happy to chat with you offline about that stuff.
Well,
This is one of those tricky things where it's like how do I walk between two organizations sometimes? So, but I'm happy to chat with you offline about that if you're interested.
So I've only been here for 4 years, but the thing that has struck me the most about Charlotte is how everybody is in their own silo. The Latino community is in a silo. The African American community is in a silo. The white progressive community is in a silo. The church communities are in a silo, and they very rarely interact with each other or support. The Palestinian community is in a silo. So there's a lot of bridge building that needs to be done. I've never been in a city where people were so strong on identity politics and so weak on common social justice issues. So Kenya, welcome. There's a lot of work to do.
Thank
Yes.
you. Well, I think that's really nice to know that the queer communities or populations are focusing on a lot of racial justice. It's something that I see sometimes lacking in some of the organizing here in Denver, where there's not these things talked about, where, you know, even within queer community, like there's still these issues of racism and other things. So that's neat. I'm excited. Thank you again.
And this may be a topic for another time because this is a big topic. It's something that Tom and I talked about, and actually we have a speaker coming. Help me remember the name, Tom. Jordan
Lopez.
Jordan Lopez is going to speak at Wedgewood, and he's the youngest. He's running for office, but he'll be the youngest legislator in Raleigh. How do we get young people, and if you want to come back and talk on this, just say another Sunday. How do we get young people to be more engaged in the social justice work? I mean, there are some, And I know their lives are busy. I know they're going to college. I know they're starting careers. I know all of that. But when they get beyond that, I know they've got kids and family, but still, how do we get them
Well,
engaged?
I would argue that they are.
They are?
Yeah. It's just I don't know how else to say this, but I think sometimes it can be, well, going to silos, I think there can be some generational siloing.
Yes.
And this is my own perspective because this is something that I have noticed, just generally speaking. I think a lot of folks from older generations who have been doing social justice work tend to be very critical of young people doing social justice work from a very patronizing perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And thinking that they know best.
Mm.
And I don't know anybody who's going to respond positively to that when they feel like they're being lectured at and not taken seriously. That's all I really want to say about that.
Okay, that's it's an interesting topic.
Well,
Yeah, I think that there are a lot of folks who, and I think it's when you've been in the work a long time, like I get it, but I think we have to listen to young people and let young people lead sometimes.
Mhm.
I totally agree. And when Joe Biden pulled out of the race, my first thought was, hey, all y'all talking, there's a lot of you need to start looking in the mirror. It's time to turn it over and listen to young people and let them take the leadership and let them take the roles. I mean, I feel like, Lord, I've been doing this for 100 years, but it's a new generation, it's a new time, and we need new voices. And older people need to start doing more listening. I
Mhm.
agree
I,
with that
I, I'm
100%.
all right with that, but I also want to say, as an old organizer, when I was a young organizer, I took every opportunity I could get to listen to veterans in the movement and to learn from them. And there are many cultures that respect the knowledge and wisdom that elders have gained. This one doesn't, for the most part. I've been to a dozen events where I introduced myself and nobody came up to me and said, what lessons have you learned? Or what do you know? What do you know that could help us be successful? Nobody ever says that. They sort of look at me as like, an old burned out man that is kind of hanging around on the fringes and might have some money to contribute.
Mm.
I think Artie had their hand raised. I think Artie wanted to say something.
Thanks, y'all. I think that there's a couple things to this. I've been organizing since high school. I'm 36 now. And I think one of the things that I hear a lot of things that I want to speak to. One is that we have to make social justice and organizing, we have to decenter voting. Like, we have to decenter voting. We have to decenter elections. We have to start with community and let elections be a tool, a piece of what we're doing to get our community vision in practice. And a lot of times I see conversations about youth and youth involvement happen at election time and complain about youth involvement. And I think that there are youth who want to be involved. They want to know like where they belong, where they'll be accepted, and not like what Liz was talking about. And I think they also like want to know that their skills will be nurtured and that they'll have mentorship and that they'll have relationship with people who want to see them really turn it over rather than just have people who follow them, right? We don't want to just create an environment where the youth are, students all the time. And I think one thing that we mess up sometimes is that we expect youth to come to us without offering anything. And I think this is true in organizing in general, is, when I want my community of volunteers to do something, they might come out, but it's because I have spent time with them, nurtured their leadership, offered, like, I'm not just training them to do a phone bank. I'm training them on how to do advocacy for anything that they want. Like, and how to put together campaigns so that they're not only reliant on whatever tactic we're doing at that moment, that they're able to like apply all those skills. And I think there's opportunities to partner with all of the different groups that are run by young people, and there are plenty in Charlotte, and talk about offering history of organizing in different places and like the ways that work. I've seen those like panels offered. Like I went to one that was part of the Poor People's Movement, and it was like people from SNCC talking about like how they did labor organizing and how that became a really big key in anti-racist organizing. And that was like one of the most fulfilling experiences I've had, but youth aren't always offered those. And, you know, we all have our own, like our own information flows, right? Like if they're not being offered something that's breaking into their information flow, they're not going to go to it. And they're not going to just like call up some, I mean, they're kids, they're like, you know, they take selfies and stuff, but ultimately they are not self-assured. They are, you know, insecure. They're developing, right? Like as a teenager, I wouldn't have walked up to an adult and said, please tell me about how you became an organizer and stuff, right? Like, so I think that there's a lot where we have to remember that we are in relationship across generation and not put any blame on any generation, right?
I love that, Artie.
Interesting thoughts.
Yeah, it just, this whole conversation makes me reflect on teachings I've gained from my Indigenous brothers and sisters and siblings about honoring the 7 generations before us and ahead of us. And so, and that whole part of just being in relationship in general, I think is a huge, huge piece that is often missing, especially with the way we have technology these days. It's a different form of relating that young people are growing up with, and you know, and older folks don't understand, and so it can make it really hard, I think. So yeah, I think it's like takes work on all ends to, you know, we just like to be more creative of like how we can relate with these big differences, and especially, yeah, these forms of technology that we're growing up with. I take it on my plate as someone who I feel like I'm in the middle as a millennial. And I'm like, I remember the days before we had, you know, when I got my first computer in our house, and we still, you know, we didn't really have like phone access the way we do. And like being young enough to understand and relate to how these young people, you know, I have a 15-year-old daughter, and the way they're growing up with this technology. So my 2 thoughts.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. And this conversation will be continued on another day. And Artie, I'm going to be reaching out to you. We would love to have you at Wedgewood. So start thinking about what you want to talk about next, what your next message to us will be, because you can count on me reaching out to you for the year so that you can come back and share more with us.